Hello, darling Lean Girls, and a big welcome to the Lean Girl Fitcast, your place for motivation and mindset mastery on your fitness and fat loss journey. We are weeks away from the festive season, and last week's episode, we spoke about that all or nothing mindset that could set us back. In contrast, you may be feeling like you have made a ton of progress this year, or perhaps in the past couple of weeks you've been dieting down to fit into that bikini and feel fantastic, and now you could be feeling a ton of fear. You could be going into these festive occasions feeling like, I don't want to have anything that's not on my plan, or being fearful to be out of routine, or maybe you're going to a stunning holiday destination where there's going to be an all-you-eat buffet and you feel like, maybe you're going to lose control. And so neither one of these mindsets, the all or nothing or the super restrictive mindsets, are going to serve us going into the festive season. So the question we want to ask here is, how do we do it in a sensible way that is going to make us firstly have a lot of fun, because that's what the festive season is about. And secondly, how do we do it making sure that we don't lose the precious progress that we've been working really hard to achieve. So I have my husband Gilan in the house, who is going to be bringing some interesting tools and perspectives to see this in a new light and create some new mindset shifts, as well as create and give us some practical ways to rethink this and give us that emotional and mental freedom and peace that we want as we head into the fun festive season.
Hey, hey.
Hey, hey, hey.
Good to be back. This is episode number something. We've done quite a few now.
16 or 17.
Great.
Yeah, we're getting into
I'm
the
excited
20s.
for this one.
We're moving out of our teens. We're doing well. I really love this one. And I actually think that this applies outside of the festive season too. I think often when we do get some fat loss result, there can be a bit of fear around, okay, now that I'm here or now that I've made progress, I don't want to do anything that's going to jeopardize that. And I think that this links into one of our previous episodes as well around, the good or bad foods, just feeling like, okay, I did this to get this result, and now anything else that is outside of that makes me feel really anxious or fearful. And that's certainly not a good mental headspace to be in, right?
Yep.
So I guess the question that we want answered here is, how do we do both? How do we have, that relaxed, peaceful attitude around the festive season, and how do we also not lose our progress?
Well, I'm about to ask the question back at you, because I know that you have had great success in your journey, but you've gone through these things, and I would love to hear your answer. I'll just sow two very quick seeds, though, as you're talking, that maybe you could speak to, or we could come back afterwards. But as you've been stating that common experience, I realize that there's a certain attachment. So we tend to attach to things in our lives and make it part of our identity, in the sense of like, this is who I am. And we can start to think that we are somebody who is always strict. Now we're in a situation where perhaps it begs of us to not be so strict. We actually feel so uncomfortable because we feel like this is not who I am. So it's about just relaxing our attachment to things that we can chat about. And very closely related to that is around familiarity as well. That even when we know something's not good for us, if it's something that we feel very familiar with, we tend to repeat those patterns. And so I just identify that just in hearing you talk. And I'd love to know what your experience is and how you have overcome this, and then I'll add on to that.
Yes, fab. So I think I've been on both extremes. I've been on the extreme side that we chatted about last week, where I would head into a festive period going totally cray and seeing every single festive event as this huge binge session. And then I've been on the opposite extreme, where I would be coming out of some kind of fat loss phase or still be in a fat loss phase, and now see the festive season as a threat and as something that I was resisting And I just wanted to stick solidly to my routine. And, and if I did indulge in something, I would feel guilty about it and be thinking afterwards, like, how many calories did I eat now? Or like, just not feeling good in the whole situation. And having a very strong food focus when I was going to festive events, not actually enjoying the conversations, not always thinking about, oh, what can I have? What can I not have? How am I going to avoid all of these things? And I think part of that was a fear of going out of control again or slipping into old bad ways. And so I think what has helped me to overcome that, and I think with all the things that we're sharing here on the podcast, it can also sound quite simple, but I think it's also important to share that it is a journey. So it wasn't this one moment that zapped me and now suddenly it was all perfect again. It was all perfect. But I think it was a progression of just learning to find balance. And I think some things that have helped me to do so from a practical perspective and from a scientific perspective, which, I always geek out on the science and I always fall back on that as a way to understand how everything works. And so on one perspective, something that I love to share is the gap between your fat loss and your maintenance calories. There's a gap. There is some room to play. And I think during festive periods or periods where I'm going on holiday or periods that I know that are not conducive to fat loss, I am totally okay with putting down the fat loss goal and being totally cool with maintaining and realizing that maintaining over the festive season is actually a phenomenal goal to work toward. You don't have to be an overachiever. And I think just also working with the flow of life, which is I think something that we're trying to talk about in the podcast as well, is when are things conducive to being in routine, to pushing ourselves harder, to putting in the effort, and when are they really not? It's like, when would be the best time to fly a kite? When it's windy outside. Or when is the best day to go to the beach? When, why do we always feel like we need to, fight? Sometimes it's about saying, okay, you know what, even though perhaps I still have a few kilos to lose, there's still a goal that I'm working toward, I can also take a rest. And a take a rest doesn't mean that you're going backward. And I think that some people misinterpret those two. They think that if I'm not making progress, I'm actually going backward. So I think that that's been one important shift to remind myself, okay, actually, or actually just shift to say, I'm cool with not losing fat right now. I can take a little break. So knowing what my maintenance calories are and knowing that I have more room to play, have fun foods. And again, it's not about being perfect. Some days I would maybe be in a surplus and other days I'm not. But having a higher calorie budget is one way to mentally free myself.
How would I find out what my maintenance calories are?
So I have a calculator on my website that can be used to get an estimate of what your calorie needs would be, and that's based on your personal stats, so on your height, your weight, your age, your activity level. So that's unique to everyone, and that number is also it's a starting point. Because everyone is different, so it's right. a good starting point from there.
So I'm assuming you'll put that in the show notes.
Yes,
for everyone.
I will include the link. So for
knowledge
anyone,
is power.
Totally. For anyone that's not sure on even what that number is, I think that that's a great place to start, is to understand, okay, what is my budget? How much am I putting in? How much am I putting out? And so even having just that in the back of your mind, not saying that you need to even count calories over the festive season. But what I've found is sometimes I actually allow myself more when I understand the math and say, okay, well, I've got the budget for it, so I may as well have it. And I think going back to that good or bad foods as well, just a reminder, if you're quite happy to have a 200 calorie protein shake in the afternoon, a 200 calorie mince pie is just as good. It's just as fab for fat loss. So I think also just reminding myself of that, we still can go back to that. Okay, if I'm not in my perfect little vegetables and protein and whatever, that now all of my results will be lost. So also remember, switch it out. If you normally have your big bowl of oats, maybe you can have your granny's pancakes or whatever, and actually the calories wouldn't be that different.
Yeah. I mean, you mentioned something earlier that reminded me of something else that you often teach, which is that it's okay to be in maintenance. And I know that, if, for example, you look at a weekly basis, if for 5 of the 7 days you're in a deficit and then for the weekend you were maintaining, if that was on a graph over time, you would just see an upward trend line of progress, because overall, you're going to be in a deficit,
Yes.
right? And which, by the way, is different, of course, to if you're in a deficit for 5 days and then you just like overindulge for those 2 days and you're in a massive surplus, then that may make you in kind of net result maintenance for the whole week.
Yes.
But that's not what we're talking about here, right? We're saying that you're in deficit and then you're in maintenance. So maintenance just puts a little pause button.
100%.
It doesn't actually make you go backwards, especially if you know that it's just like a little island of reprieve, which is totally okay in the festive season. So I just thought that if that's okay on a weekly basis, then if we look at it on an annual basis, having a week or two of festive season reprieve where you're on maintenance is much the same philosophy, isn't it?
I love that. I love that visual of like a pause button, which you smacking to be like, okay. And ironically, when you do hit that pause button, very often you feel inspired again. And when you are back in routine, you're like giving it horns and you really can get back to your consistency and your accuracy. And I think in a work context, often when we have a lot on our plate, when we are feeling tired, we're overcommitted, we feel like we just need to push harder, try harder. And actually, the best thing from experience when I'm feeling like a bit flat is actually to take a break. And it's amazing how that re-energizes you and re-motivates you to get going again. And then the second thing that I wanted to mention is to realize that I really can enjoy all the festive food. Maybe it's not going to be, so the little saying I always repeat to myself is you can have it all, maybe not just all at once. So choosing on the festive days that I'm having, I'll look at everything and say, what are the things that I really want to enjoy and indulge in here? And just because it's there, I don't have to be on the opposite extreme where I have everything, but I'm also not just going to be going for the green salad and the protein. You know, this is the opportunity to enjoy all of the lovely things that your family has made, or things that are outside of the things that you would normally do. And again, going back to the math, over the short term, it's actually a lot harder than we think to gain fat. So if you think that you need 7,000 calories over and above your maintenance to gain a kilogram of fat, I promise you are not eating 7,000 calories over your budget on a festive feast, especially if you're just checking in and being like, you know what, I'm satisfied with this, I'm having a few things, and that's enough for me.
That makes total sense. But I think that it really is a mind shift game. You know, perception is reality in a sense. And so we create a whole bunch of suffering and frustration and chronic tenseness around the whole festive season, and even fear, because the perception that if I overeat once or twice, at the big festive, the Christmas dinner or lunch or whatever, that's suddenly going to sabotage everything. So I think that we need to perhaps just question those conditioned thoughts and feelings, and to know that just because we have them doesn't mean that they actually have any truth in them.
Or that they're reality.
Exactly.
And I think that it's such an important point, because I think how we feel and what the reality is so different.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sure you'll know, like after a big festive meal, you can feel like you gained 2 kilograms. Like your pants, your buttons are feeling a little bit tight. And suddenly like you have a little glance in the mirror and you're like, oh wow, I've lost all my progress. When this is very far from the truth.
Yeah, it's a false intuition. And we get false intuitions all the time in life with everything, where we tell ourselves a story only later to find out that it's not true. But in that moment, it can feel true. And I think that it's just good to go back to the science, which is exactly what you're teaching. So what you're teaching is really empowering people to know, like, wow, you would have to eat 7,000 calories just to gain one kilogram. And so I think that it's really important to know this,
to grasp
and not
that.
just go off on how we feel. Otherwise, our emotions and these conclusions that we erroneously jump to just lead us totally astray.
And I think what we were discussing when we were planning this topic was, what would make us anxious to put a pause on it is when we feel that impatience, which was another topic we spoke about. And it's because we feel like if we can get to the result that we want faster, we wouldn't want to put a pause on this, because we're under this illusion that once we get to this result, we're going to be happy. When, as we know, and we've discussed in so many of these episodes, and we will continue to discuss, because that's the root of most things, right?
Yeah, exactly. We really need to just get realistic with ourselves and to understand that nothing outside of ourselves can make us happy. Getting some result or eating some food and it applies to everything, having some relationship or doing some activity. We keep thinking that these external things will make us happy. But all that attaining those things does is it gives us momentary relief from the unhappiness that seeking these things outside of us actually is causing. So it's the seeking, it's the desiring, it's the craving, it's the wanting, it's that sense of thirst for something that I don't have that actually creates that unhappiness and that impatience and everything. And so we've fallen under this delusion that it's the attainment of something outside of us that's going to make us feel okay inside. The moment we're able to see through that and to realize that if we just let go of seeking something outside of ourselves to be happy, then we can get back in touch with that inherent natural happiness, patience, contentment, fulfillment that we already are, that's already inside of us. And once we're in touch with that, balance in all of our decisions starts to emerge, because now we're no longer relying on some food or fulfilling some craving or reaching some number on the scale in order to feel okay inside. So all of our decisions, all of our actions can either come from a place of lack, that is the craving, the thirst, the wanting, the desiring, or from a place of love, which is that feeling of fulfillment, of already feeling okay inside, of knowing, hey, I have this inherent happiness that is not contingent on, it's not dependent on something outside of me being achieved. This is a huge difference. And of course, I'm shortening what we've gone into in great detail in previous episodes. So if you're watching, or if you're listening to this for the first time, I highly recommend going back to previous episodes. But this really, like you mentioned, is the absolute root cause of all of this frustration and suffering.
And as we mentioned in our previous episode around the all or nothing mindset, I think this is in contrast, but we're actually doing the same thing, is often when we are going overboard with the food, we are thinking that food is going to bring us joy. And in contrast, sometimes the restriction is that pat on the back that we get. We feel good when we are in a deficit and we are eating as little as possible, which obviously we're not promoting here. So I think that is the opposite extreme. And finding that balance is being able to say, I can put a pause on this now. It's the festive season. I'm going to turn my focus toward having fun with my family, toward the lovely food that I get to eat, and being totally okay and at peace, and realizing that you can pick it up again. And I also I think it's important to reflect on the growth that you've had, on the new beautiful habits that you've picked up, and you're not just going to lose it all. You're not just going to slip into old bad ways. I think you need to have that confidence in yourself. You need to have that self-trust, and just maybe have a little check-in with yourself and a reminder, and maybe jot down all the progress that you've made from a mental perspective. Hopefully listening to the podcast, you've also picked up some new tools and mindsets along the way as well.
Yeah, and it just loops back to what I had said right at the beginning, which is that sense of familiarity that we become attached to. And we see it all the time, for example, when I work with entrepreneurs, and an entrepreneur loves being the underdog and creating something from scratch and kind of fighting their way to success. And then when many of them reach a level of success that doesn't feel familiar, that they don't have to fight to be successful. So then they land up making bad decisions, like going and opening up a whole new division or a new branch, or because they start a whole new business because they want to. The fight feels familiar. And so these patterns of okay, now we start to feel attached to this, being in this crazy deficit and having no flexibility, but it's something that feels familiar. You know how to deal with it, you know how to handle it, and it almost becomes a bit of your identity. So it's about non-attachment. It's about not being dependent on anything, even the familiarity of being in a deficit. And when we can just soften that a little bit and we allow ourselves a little bit more flexibility without giving up that sense of being okay inside.
Yes. So I hope that this podcast has inspired you to give yourself that bit of permission to indulge a little bit, to hit that pause button when it comes to all of the festive season. And remember, it is only 1 or 2 weeks of the year that it is totally okay. Actually, at any time of the year, it's okay to hit the pause button. But again, moving with the flow of life, perhaps this is not the most conducive time to you being in a fat loss phase. And actually, this is going to be the very thing that is going to fire you up again to be more consistent, to be more accurate come the new year, and things are then conducive to you actually being in that kind of phase. So I hope that this has given you a bit of peace of mind, given you that permission to indulge in all of the lovely things, totally guilt-free, because that's the only way we should be indulging. And also just to trust yourself that you are going to enjoy everything in moderation, and have that mindful moment with your delicious mince pie or your mom's oxtail or whatever it is that you're going to be indulging in this festive season. Thank you so much for joining in to this week's episode. This is going to be actually the second last episode. Next week, we have one final little note to take you into the Christmas and festive season. And then we will be officially into 2024, where we have some really exciting topics planned to help you move into the new year feeling inspired, getting that mindset right, and firing up your motivation. So if you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a comment, share this episode. Everyone is going to be facing this heading into the festive season, so I'm sure there's someone on your mind that this will serve them going into that season. Thank you, babe, as well, for your lovely contribution as always.
Pleasure.
Don't forget to follow Gilan on Instagram so you can check out all the other amazing work that he does. And thank you so much for showing up, listening to us. We love recording these episodes for you, and I really hope that it's adding value to you on your fitness and fat loss journey. We will check you back here next week again on the Lean Girl Fitcast, sending you lots of love and wishing you so much joy, happiness, and unforgettable moments as you head into the festive period.